People have always wanted to fly. Way back in the 17th century, Bishop John Wilkins pondered whether a person could fly if they flapped their arms really, really hard. More recently, people largely gave up on this and invented the jetpack instead. The first attempt at a jetpack can be seen in a 1920s patent for a backpack rocket. This was awarded to a Russian engineer named Alexander Theodorovich Andreev. Like most rockets, this would work by having a powerful pump combine a fuel and an oxidizer in a combustion chamber. Since small, powerful motors weren't really available yet, the pump was to be powered by clockwork. For some reason, this idea never really took off. Another thing that never really took off was the first attempt at selling jetpacks commercially. It all seemed to go pretty well until all the murder and kidnapping started. The jetpack is primarily the invention of Wendell Moore. He created it while he was working for Bell Aeronautics in the 1950s. Most jetpacks are really rockets powered by hydrogen peroxide, a substance most famous for making hair turn blonde. Though peroxide bleaches are usually only about 2% pure. Fuel-grade hydrogen peroxide looks a bit like water. That is, until it encounters a catalyst, such as silver, upon contact with which it explodes into a mixture of steam and oxygen, superheated to 740 degrees Celsius, and expands about 5,000 times. Ideally, it is nowhere near your hair when it does this. Instead of clockwork, pressurized gas is used to pump the fuel, making for a very simple and lightweight rocket. Unfortunately, since hydrogen peroxide is a relatively low-powered fuel, jetpacks like this can only stay in the air for about 20 seconds. Later, Wendell Moore created a true jet-powered jetpack. This could fly for up to 25 minutes, but was very heavy and broke down a lot. Only one was ever made before Wendell Moore died of a heart attack and the project was abandoned. Though later, the Army recycled its ultra-small jet engine design when they were making cruise missiles. The hydrogen peroxide-powered kind of jetpack, though, became a lot more famous. An engineer named Nelson Tyler, working from photographs and scraps of information, built one in his backyard. This is the one you've seen on TV. It was used in the Olympics, at Michael Jackson concerts, at the Super Bowl, at the Daytona 500, at the MTV Music Awards, and many, many more places. It became so profitable, in fact, that 2 more were made, and a company called Powerhouse Productions was set up to license them. In the early 90s, a former insurance salesman named Brad Barker got a job with this company. While working there, he saw just how much money was being made. After a while, Barker quit his job and formed a company with aeronautics engineer Larry Stanley. This company, the American Rocket Belt Corporation, was funded by large amounts of money that the partners borrowed from their mothers, and later also by $50,000 from Joe Wright, a friend who owned a local car stereo business. Their plan was to use cutting-edge technology to make the best jetpack in the world, and after recouping their cost with appearance fees, turning out more copies for sale to whoever wanted one. It took more than 3 years for them to develop a working prototype, but the resulting machine, the RB-2000, was by all accounts a wonderful piece of engineering. Made with modern, lightweight materials and with an increased fuel tank size, it was capable of an impressive 30 seconds of flight. The prototype was finally completed in October 1994. It was also around this time that Stanley began to suspect that Barker had been using some highly creative bookkeeping. When Barker was confronted over this, he became upset, He expressed this upset by repeatedly beating Stanley over the head with a large hammer of the kind traditionally used for panel beating. He then took the jetpack and left. Stanley spent 5 weeks unsuccessfully trying to track Barker and the prototype down. He was just about to give up when he saw them on TV, making a flight at a basketball game. Learning that their financier, Joe Wright, had been present at the flight, Stanley tried to convince him to help find Barker and the jetpack. By this time, Wright was suffering from a lot of business and personal troubles, and his behavior was somewhat erratic, but he eventually agreed to help. 4 days later, he was found horribly murdered. Barker was immediately arrested on suspicion of his murder, but was released after 3 days of questioning due to a lack of evidence. Stanley eventually won a lawsuit against Barker, being awarded sole ownership of the jetpack and $10.2 million in damages. However, Barker was broke and claimed that he didn't know where the jetpack was. Stanley was, understandably, upset. Less understandably, he kidnapped Barker, took him to the desert, tied him up, and held him captive in a box disguised as a scuba tank repository. 8 days later, while Stanley was trying to convince him to sign over his rights to the company at gunpoint, Barker escaped through a window. After running for 2 miles, he reached a phone and called the FBI. In 2002, Stanley was sentenced to life in prison, though this was later reduced to 8 years. The RB-2000 has never been found. When asked if he thought it would ever resurface, Barker reportedly said, "It is possible it will show up someday. You never know." On the whole, the incident gives new meaning to the term, "Where's my jetpack?" In 2008, it was made into an unsuccessful film starring Paul Giamatti. A truly sad end for any business venture. Since then, several hobbyists have made their own jetpacks. Kai Michelson has made several, including one for his 7-year-old son. Michelson is also responsible for a number of similar projects, including a rocket-powered toilet. In the last few years, hydrogen peroxide jetpacks have been offered for sale by a Mexican company, but with little success. Another group, based in New Zealand, hope to soon start selling one with a flight time of half an hour. But despite being sold as a jetpack, this device is really more of a backpack helicopter, and everyone knows that they're just not as cool.